My fiancée said, "I think I can do better than you right now." I didn't stop her and let her leave. Months later, she tried reaching out after seeing everything I built while she was searching for something else. "I think I can do better than you right now." She said it the same way someone says they want to try a different restaurant. Not cruel, not screaming, just casual, like she was canceling a gym membership. I stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for her. The mug still warm in my hand. And I didn't say a single word back. I didn't know it then, but that silence was the most important thing I ever did. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We had been together for 4 years. I was 28. She was 26. We had been engaged for 7 months. Her name was Cassandra. Her friends called her Cass. I used to call her the one person I'd rebuilt my whole life for. That should tell you everything you need to know. Let me back up. Not far. Just far enough. We met at a friend's birthday party in the city. One of those rooftop things where everyone is dressed sharper than they need to be and the drinks are overpriced and the music is just slightly too loud to have a real conversation. I was standing near the railing, looking out at the skyline, not really in the mood to network or perform. She walked up beside me, looked out at the same view, and said, "I always wonder if people who live in those buildings actually appreciate the view or if they stop seeing it after a week." I said, "Probably a week. Maybe 2 if they're the sentimental type." She laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like it wasn't expecting to come out. We talked for 3 hours that night. Didn't exchange numbers until she was already in the elevator leaving, and she stuck her hand out at the last second to stop the doors. That was 4 years ago. Those 3 hours felt like a promise, and I spent 4 years trying to keep it. I need to be honest about something. When she said those words, "I think I can do better than you right now," she wasn't wrong. Not entirely. I was in a rough stretch. My company, a small creative consulting firm I had built from nothing, had lost its 2 biggest clients in the same quarter. One went in-house. One just vanished into a bigger agency that swallowed them whole. We were still profitable, still standing, but the momentum had stalled in a way I felt in my chest every morning when I woke up. I was stressed. I was quieter than usual. I wasn't showing up to things the way I used to. Birthday dinners I forgot to book reservations for. Weekend trips I kept pushing back because I needed to be available if something came up with work. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But there's a difference between noticing someone is going through something and deciding that the timing of their struggle is inconvenient for you. She chose to call it a version of herself settling. That's the part one couldn't forgive. The week before she said it, she had been different. Distant. Texting in a way that felt performative, like she was checking a box. Coming home late from her job, she worked in event planning, and going straight to the shower, then straight to bed without much conversation. I noticed, but I told myself it was her being stressed too. We were both stressed. We were engaged. We were building something. That's how it goes. I didn't realize I was the only one still trying to build it. There was one moment that should have told me something was wrong. A Thursday night, around 11. She was on her phone, and she tilted the screen away from me when I sat down next to her on the couch. A small thing. So small I almost convinced myself I imagined it. I didn't bring it up. That was a mistake. Not because of what it meant, but because of what I let myself accept by staying quiet. The morning it happened was a Saturday. I had woken up early and made breakfast. Real breakfast, not just coffee and cereal, but eggs and toast and sliced fruit, because I was trying. Because I had been trying. Because somewhere in the back of my head, I knew something was off and I was still choosing to respond with effort instead of accusation. She came downstairs and sat at the table, and she had this look on her face. Not sad, not nervous, something almost clinical, like she had rehearsed something in her head so many times that she had moved past the emotional part of it. I set the coffee down in front of her. I picked up mine. I asked how she slept. She said, "We need to talk." And I said, "Okay, because what else do you say?" She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked up at me with that clear, prepared expression and said, "I think I can do better than you right now. I need to figure some things out, and I don't want to do that while being engaged." The room got very quiet. Not an external quiet. More like the kind of quiet that happens inside your head when your brain needs a second to process something that doesn't fit. I looked at the table. I looked at my coffee. I looked at the ring box on the counter that had a spare ring she had once asked me to resize. And then I looked at her. She was still watching me with that composed, patient expression, like she was waiting for me to argue or fall apart or beg. Like she had braced for one of those responses. I didn't give her either. I said, "All right." She blinked. That's it. That's it. You're not going to say anything? I thought about it for a moment. I genuinely did. I ran through 100 things I could have said. Could have asked who changed her mind about us. Could have told her how much work I had put into the last 4 years. Could have reminded her that 6 months ago, she was the one who said she wanted to start a family before she was 30. But here's the thing. When someone tells you they think they can do better than you, they are not asking for your rebuttal. They have already decided. Anything you say in that moment just becomes evidence for why they were right to leave. So I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. And I meant it. Genuinely. Because I also knew it would be the last thing she expected from me. She left 3 days later. Took most of her things. Left a candle and 2 books and a ceramic planter she said she didn't have room for. I threw away the candle. I kept the books. I put a plant in the planter. And then I went to work. I want to be clear about something. I was not fine. I was not the guy who shrugs and moves on and throws himself into productivity like some Instagram reel about resilience. The first 2 weeks were brutal. Absolutely brutal. The kind of grief that sits on your chest while you sleep and is already there waiting when you wake up. The engagement ring refund process alone was humiliating in a way I don't have the right words for. Talking to a jeweler about returning something you bought with the assumption that your life was going in a particular direction, that's a specific kind of loss. I ate badly. I slept inconsistently. I called my friend Wesley too many times late at night and talked in circles about what I could have done differently. He was patient. He told me something I didn't want to hear, which was, you didn't do anything wrong. She just decided she didn't want to wait. That hit different than I expected, because the word wait implied something. And the more I sat with it, the more I understood what she had actually been thinking. She hadn't left because things were bad. She had left because she didn't believe things would get better. She had looked at where I was in that moment, struggling, quieter, rebuilding, and decided that the trajectory wasn't worth her patience. She wanted someone who had already arrived. She didn't want to be present for the journey. And that told me something about the last 4 years that I had been refusing to see. About 6 weeks after she left, I had a conversation with my business partner, Theo, that I think about a lot. We were sitting in the office late on a Tuesday, going through numbers, and he asked me, point blank, are we pivoting or are we done? I hadn't eaten since noon. There was cold coffee on my desk. The ceiling light had been flickering for a week and neither of us had bothered to change the bulb. I looked at him and I said, we're pivoting. He said, into what? And I said something I hadn't planned to say. I said, brand storytelling. Full service. Not just consulting. We become the team. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, that's 3 times our current overhead. I said, I know. We'd have to hire. I know. We might not survive the transition. We might not survive staying the same either. He thought about it. He tapped his pen on the desk 3 times. Then he said, okay, that was the pivot. It doesn't sound dramatic telling it back, but it was the moment the trajectory changed. I don't think I would have been willing to make that call 6 months earlier. Cass and I had been talking about buying a place. Stability was the goal. You don't blow up your overhead when you're trying to put down roots. But she had taken the roots with her when she left. And it turned out I needed to be untethered to make the leap. The next 8 months were the hardest I've worked in my life. We restructured everything. Brought on 2 full-time creatives and a strategist named Devin who had just left a larger firm and wanted to build something instead of maintain something. That energy mattered. We pitched differently, positioned differently, started turning down clients who wanted cheap and fast, which felt insane when money was tight, but turned out to be the right call because the reputation we were building started attracting a different tier of client. By month 4, we had signed a contract with a regional tech company that was 3 times the size of anything we'd handled before. By month 6, that project had turned into a case study that we used to pitch 2 more. By month 8, I had to turn down 3 projects in a single week because we couldn't take them all on. I hired 2 more people. I moved into a new apartment, bigger, quieter, with actual light in the mornings. I started cooking again, started exercising again, not compulsively, not as punishment, just as the natural byproduct of having something to wake up for. I want to be careful here because I'm not trying to make this sound like a montage. It wasn't clean or linear. There were weeks in the middle where I second-guessed everything and had conversations with Theo at midnight where we both quietly wondered if we had overreached. But it held. And then it didn't just hold. It grew. I should tell you something about the months after she left, because this matters for later. I did not post about it. Not on social media. Not on LinkedIn with some vague caption about growth and new chapters. Not anywhere. I went quiet online in a way that was deliberate. I took my personal accounts off active. I didn't post about the business wins, the new office, the team, the contracts. I kept my head down and I built. My friend Wesley told me once that the best thing you can do after a bad breakup is disappear for a while. Not dramatically, not in a way that's designed to be noticed. Just quietly become unavailable. Let them wonder, he said. The silence is louder than anything you could post. I didn't do it as strategy. I did it because I genuinely needed to be in my own head for a while without performing for an audience. But it had an effect I didn't anticipate. The people in our overlapping social circle, friends of friends, her coworkers she had introduced me to, acquaintances who knew us as a couple, started to notice my absence. Not my absence from her, just my absence in general. The fact that I had gone dark while, apparently, she had not. She was posting, traveling, appearing in photos at events. She looked like someone enjoying the freedom of a decision they felt good about. I looked like someone who had ceased to exist. Until I didn't. The first time our worlds intersected again was about 9 months after she left. It was not a chance encounter. It was not some dramatic face-to-face at a mutual friend's event. It was an Instagram follow request. Not from her. From a friend of hers. A woman named Petra who I had met a handful of times over the years, and who had always been friendly in that neutral way that means she liked me fine, but her loyalty was obviously to Cass. The follow request was strange enough on its own. But what was stranger was the timing. Because 2 weeks earlier, I had finally posted again. Just a few photos. The new office. Some behind-the-scenes work content. A picture of the team at a dinner we had after closing a major deal. Nothing flashy. Just evidence that I existed and that existence had become something. The follow request came 12 days after those posts. I followed back. Didn't think much of it. 2 days later, she DM'd me. Hey, hope you're doing well. Love what you've been building. That's all she said. I said thank you. Asked how she was. She said good and sent a few lines about her own work. And then, in the middle of what seemed like casual conversation, she said, Cass has been asking about you. I read that sentence 3 times. I put my phone down. I picked it up again. I wrote, I hope she's well. That was it. Because what else do you say to that? But I knew what was coming. It came 11 days later. A message from a number I didn't have saved anymore, but recognized immediately. Hey, I know this is probably not what you want, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately, and I wanted to reach out. I hope that's okay. I sat with that message for 2 full days before I responded. Not because I was trying to be dramatic or strategic or make her wait the way people do in the early stages of something. I sat with it because I genuinely needed to think about what I wanted to say, what I actually felt, whether there was anything left in me that wanted to reopen that particular door. And I'm going to be honest with you, there was still something there. That's the uncomfortable truth. For years doesn't just evaporate. The person you were with, the way they laughed, the inside jokes, the ordinary Tuesday nights watching bad television, that stuff doesn't disappear on command. It fades, but it doesn't vanish. But I also knew something else. I knew that the person she was reaching out to was not the person she had left. Not just because of what I had built, the business, the momentum, the new life, but because the version of me that existed now would never have accepted the way she left in silence and called it doing better. The version of me now had too much clarity for that. I wrote back. I said, I appreciate you reaching out. I hope you're genuinely doing well. But I want to be honest with you. I'm not sure what there is to talk about. She responded quickly. Too quickly. Like she had been waiting. She said, I think I made a mistake. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I think I was scared and I ran. I've missed you. I've missed us. I know that's probably the last thing you want to hear right now, but I wouldn't be saying it if I didn't mean it. I read that message a few times, and then I noticed something. Not a small thing. She said she had missed us. She said she thought she made a mistake. She said she wouldn't reach out unless she meant it. But she didn't ask how I was doing. Not once. Not a single question about what my life looked like, what I had been building, how I felt, what the last 10 months had actually been like for me. She had reached out to tell me about her experience of missing me, not to find out if I was someone who still had room for her. And that was the moment, the one I keep returning to, where everything became completely clear. I took another day. Then I wrote the response I had been composing in my head since the first message arrived. I told her, I believe you that you mean it. And I'm not angry. I want you to know that, genuinely, I'm not carrying anger toward you. But I need you to understand something. When you left, you told me you thought you could do better. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I let you go because I respected what you were saying, even though it hurt in a way I don't have words for. What happened after that? I don't think either of us expected. I rebuilt, not to prove something to you or anyone else, because I had to, because standing still wasn't an option. And what I built is mine in a way that nothing ever has been before. I'm not the person you left. I'm not the person who was struggling and quiet and couldn't show up the way you needed. I'm also not the person who would go back to something that ended the way ours did. Not because of pride. Because I know now what I'm worth when I'm not shrinking myself to fit someone else's timeline. I genuinely hope you find what you were looking for when you left. But I don't think it's me anymore. Take care of yourself. I sent it. Closed the app. Went back to work. She replied twice after that. The first time was a long message, paragraphs, explaining herself. The context I hadn't known. That there had been someone else she was interested in at the time. That it hadn't worked out. That she realized afterward that she had confused being tempted with being unhappy. That what she had with me was real, and she had been stupid, and she was sorry. I read it once. I didn't respond. The second message came 3 weeks later. Just 4 words. I hope you're happy. I thought about that message for a while. Whether it was sincere, whether it was final, whether it was something she sent because she needed closure or because she was still hoping I'd crack. I decided it didn't matter which one. I sent back, I am. And that was true. Uncomplicatedly, factually, genuinely true in a way I hadn't expected to feel for a long time. I was happy, not because she had come back wanting me, not because I had won some competition I didn't sign up for, but because 10 months earlier, I had been standing in a kitchen holding 2 cups of coffee, and someone I loved had told me she thought she could do better than me, and I had let her go without a single argument. And it turned out that silence was the kindest thing I had ever done for myself. There's a version of this story where I end it by talking about what I learned. About growth. About knowing your worth. About how losing someone can be the catalyst for becoming yourself. But I'm not going to do that. Because the truth is simpler and less tidy than that. The truth is that I got lucky. Not in the way that sounds. Not lucky that she left. Not lucky that things worked out. Lucky that I knew, in the moment, to stay quiet. Lucky that I didn't spend the next 10 months chasing an explanation or waiting for an apology. Lucky that Theo said, okay, when I said we were pivoting. Lucky that Devin decided to take a chance on us. Lucky that the work landed the way it did. Things could have gone differently. They don't always go the way mine did. But they also don't always go the way they did because some people spend the time after a loss looking backward instead of forward. Some people spend it trying to convince themselves, or the person who left, that they were worth staying for. I never looked back. Not once. And I think that's the only thing I can actually take credit for. The candle she left, I said I threw it away. That's not entirely true. I put it in a box in the closet for about 2 weeks, which I think is the honest thing to do with objects that have weight. Then one afternoon I took it out, looked at it for a minute, and threw it in the trash. It was a sandalwood candle. Good quality. Burned well, probably. But it wasn't mine. It was a leftover from a version of my life that had already closed. The planter, though, the ceramic one she said she didn't have room for, I kept that. Put a small pot hose in it. The thing grew like it had somewhere to be. Some things take care of themselves, once you give them a little room. The business is still growing. We brought on our 7th full-time hire 2 months ago. We moved into a bigger space last spring. Real office, not just a corner of a co-working spot. We turned down a buyout offer last quarter, which felt surreal to even type, because 18 months ago, I wasn't sure we'd survive to the next contract. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because when she said she thought she could do better than me, she was looking at a single moment in time and calling it a destination. She saw the rough patch and decided it was the whole terrain. She didn't know what I was capable of. Honestly, neither did I. I went back to that rooftop once. Different occasion, another friend's birthday, different crowd. I stood near the same railing and looked out at the same skyline and thought about that night 4 years ago when a woman stuck her hand out of an elevator to stop the doors. I thought about how sure I was, in that moment, that I was looking at the beginning of everything. I thought about how sure I was, a year ago, standing in a kitchen, that I was looking at the end of everything. Neither was exactly right. It was all just the middle. The last thing I want to say is this. She told me she thought she could do better than me. Maybe she was right. Maybe somewhere out there, in the version of her life that exists now, she found it, whatever better looked like to her. I hope she did. I mean that without bitterness. But I also know that whatever better I was missing, I found it too. Just not the way either of us expected. The plant in her ceramic pot is still alive, by the way. Almost 2 years now. I've moved it twice. It adapted both times. Turns out it just needed the right space to grow.